They survived temperatures that would kill an exposed human being in under 4 minutes. No concrete walls, no central heating, no modern insulation, just felt, wood, animal bodies, and a knowledge system so precise that modern Arctic engineers are still reverse engineering it today. But here's what nobody tells you about the Mongols. Their greatest military advantage wasn't their horses, their bows, or their generals. It was something they did every single winter night on the open steppe, something so sophisticated that it kept entire civilizations alive at minus 50 degrees Celsius, nearly 100 degrees below freezing. And by the end of this, you'll understand why a nomadic herder from 13th century Mongolia could survive conditions that would defeat a modern soldier with a full kit. Stay with me, because the secret they used, we'll get to it. It involves the animals sleeping inside their homes, but not for the reason you think. The Mongolian steppe in winter is not simply cold, it is a different category of hostile. Larger than the entire landmass of Western Europe, this treeless, flat ocean of frozen grass offers nowhere to hide, no natural windbreaks, no shelter of any kind. The wind that crosses it doesn't blow, it strips. It pulls heat from exposed flesh within minutes and drives ice crystals through the smallest gap in any garment. Mongolian herders called the worst of these winters Zud, a compound catastrophe where summer drought is followed by cold so extreme and snow so deep that entire herds of livestock are buried and suffocated where they stand. A Zud didn't just threaten comfort, it threatened the complete annihilation of a family's entire livelihood, their animals, their food source, their wool supply, their future. And yet, ice core records and tree ring data confirmed that Mongolian herding families survived winter events equivalent in severity to modern Antarctic conditions, carrying everything they needed on horseback. The question isn't just how, the question is how they engineered it well enough that almost no one failed. It started before the first snowflake fell. By October, the Mongolian herder had transformed into something between a meteorologist and a landscape architect. The decision of where to establish the winter camp, called the Otag, determined every outcome that followed. The steppe looks featureless to an untrained eye, but to a herder whose grandfather's grandfather had walked this same ground, it was a map of invisible forces. The critical skill was called Na, finding the shadow of the mountain. The ideal winter camp occupied the southern face of elevated terrain, where Siberian winds passing from the north would deflect upward and over the camp rather than through it, where the low-angle winter sun would strike the ground at maximum efficiency, and where a frozen river or stream lay within walking distance. That water source wasn't optional. Even locked under ice, it was the only reliable supply for hundreds of animals and an entire family through months of deep winter. Daily, someone would chop through the surface to reach the flowing water beneath. Miss that calculation, and the camp failed before the worst cold even arrived. Timing the migration south was its own inherited science. Families spent the final weeks of autumn fattening their herds on the last available grass while reading atmospheric signals passed down across generations, the behavior of specific birds, the color of evening skies, the direction subtle pressure changes sent smoke from cooking fires. Leave too early and you sacrificed weeks of grazing. Leave too late and heavy snowfall could block the routes entirely, trapping thousands of animals in the open where they would freeze or starve within days. The movement itself, thousands of sheep, goats, horses, and cattle driven across increasingly hostile terrain, was a carefully staged military retreat. In the winter camp locations, archaeological evidence confirms that specific sites were used repeatedly across decades, even centuries. The knowledge of safe ground was considered more valuable than any physical object a family owned. Now, here is where it becomes genuinely extraordinary. A single yurt standing alone on the winter steppe would not survive a serious storm. The Mongols knew this, so they didn't build individual shelters, they built a collective fortress. The winter camp arrangement was called a kur, meaning circle, and every element of its layout followed principles refined across centuries of Arctic-level survival. Families position their yurts in a tight circular or U-shaped formation, doors facing south or southeast, gaps between structures minimized until the yurts formed an almost continuous wall of felt in wood. This created something remarkable inside, a protected microclimate. Ground-level wind, the most lethally cold air on the steppe, was blocked entirely by the outer ring of structures. Inside the circle, temperatures could run several degrees warmer than the surrounding open steppe, and in the mathematics of -50 survival, several degrees is the difference between living and not. Into that protected central space went the livestock every evening, and this is where the secret gets interesting, and where modern thermal engineers have started paying very close attention. 100 sheep packed together generate substantial, measurable collective body heat. In the windless center of a properly arranged winter camp, that living mass of warm bodies could raise the ambient temperature by 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. The animals weren't just protected assets, they were active components of the heating system. Human structures shielded the animals from wind exposure. Animal bodies, in return, warmed the air the humans were breathing. Where materials allowed, low walls of stacked stone or compressed blocks of dried dung reinforced the camp's outer perimeter, disrupting the ground-level wind that might slip between structures and preventing snow from drifting inside the circle. Excavations of winter campsites have uncovered the post holes in stone arrangements that confirm exactly these defensive layouts. This was not accidental, it was engineered. The yurt itself, called the ger, represented thousands of years of aerodynamic refinement. Its circular base and domed profile meant that wind encountering it found no flat surface to batter and no sharp edge to grip. Air simply flowed around and over it. But the shape was only the beginning. Winter gers were wrapped in up to 12 layers of thick felt, a material that modern synthetic insulators, despite all our technology, still struggled to meaningfully improve upon. Felt is a dense matrix of interlocked wool fibers, creating millions of microscopic air pockets, each one a tiny resistor against heat transfer. Outer layers were treated with animal fat, waterproofing the surface against snow and ice. The iron stove sat directly beneath the crown opening of the roof, and this positioning was deliberate. It created a convection loop that pulled fresh air in at floor level, circulated heat throughout the interior, and vented dangerous carbon monoxide upward and out. The fire burned dried animal dung, argol, which produced high heat with minimal smoke. Families maintained it in shifts through the night, because if that fire died at 3 in the morning, when temperatures outside hit their lowest point, people could be dead before dawn. The floor received as much engineering attention as the walls. Ground contact drains body heat as efficiently as wind exposure, so the earth was layered with old felt, animal hides placed fur side up, and dried